Welcome, and welcome. The following presentation, we are going to be going through the history of Sylheti and Sylhet. Now, I've used a number of references from various sources, and these information can be found at the end of the presentation should you wish to research further or cross-examine. The presentation is in depth to a degree, and therefore I'll give you a snippet of what it entails. The traditionalist story of the origin of Syloti Nagri alphabet is that it was developed around the beginning of the 14th century by Saint Shahjalal and his 360 saintly companions, most of whom were Arabic speakers. Other scripts used at that time were deemed unsuitable for the Sylheti language. In the late 17th century, Persian became the official language of the Delhi Sultanate, and the Perso-Arabic script was used in all official documents. The Sylheti language and alphabet continue to be used by the ordinary people for everyday matters. In the 1860s, a Sylheti by the name of Maulvi Abdul Karim spent several years in Europe and learned the printing trade. After returning home, he designed a woodblock type for the Syloti Nagri alphabet and founded the Islamia Press in Sylhet town in about 1870. Other Sylheti presses were established in Sunamganj, Shillong and Calcutta. These presses fell out of use during the early 1970s. Since then, the Syloti Nagri alphabet has been used mainly by linguists and academics. Now let's get started. To get a concept of Sylhet formation and how Sylhet has inherited its traditions, we have to go back as far as the Maurya dynasty, which started around 250 BCE. Now, as you can see from the map, the empire was very vast and spread across all of the regions of India, Pakistan, and then some. Here you can see some references to the Maurya dynasty. You can see through the images below how the dynasties got broken down. On your left is the Gupta Empire, around 400 AD. As the years passed, many empires were created and overall geographical dimensions got smaller. This slide shows an image of the 765 CE Pala Empire. You can see surrounding empires like Ghurid Sultanate and Yadava dynasty with considerable presence, but you also see the downscaling of Chola Empire from the previous empires. There was a considerable presence by the Delhi Sultanate dynasty, which took over a lot of the smaller portion of empires from previous. But this did not sustain for long, as the empire was split up into various other sections. Note at this point the creation of Bengal Empire and how much land presence the area had. Sylhet was part of Greater Bengal. You can see clearly on the map the regional location. After the arrival of powerful Maratha Empire in northern India, the Bengal province became autonomous and was ruled by the Nawab of Bengal. After the Battle of Plassey, the region became an administrative division of British India, with Bengal's capital Calcutta acting as the Indian capital. Curzon's partition of Bengal in 1905 to 1911. The first partition of Bengal, 1905, was a territorial reorganization of the Bengal Presidency implemented by the authorities of the British Raj. The reorganization separated the largely Muslim eastern area from the largely Hindu western areas. Bengal, Bihar and Orissa had formed a single province of British India since 1765. By 1900, the province had grown too large to handle under a single administration. East Bengal, because of isolation and poor communications, had been neglected in favor of West Bengal and Bihar. Curzon chose one of several schemes for partition to unite Assam, which had been a part of the province until 1874, with 15 districts of East Bengal. The partition of Bengal in 1947, part of the partition of India, divided the British Indian province of Bengal based on the Radcliffe Line between the Dominion of India and the Dominion of Pakistan. The Hindu majority West Bengal became a state of India, and the Muslim majority of East Bengal, now known as Bangladesh, became a province of Pakistan. On 6 July 1947, the Sylhet referendum decided to sever Sylhet from Assam and merge into East Bengal. East Bengal became the independent country of Bangladesh after the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. After Bengal division, Sylhet division happened in four places. Ancient name of Sylhet was Sribhumi, Gauriajaya, Srihatta. The lower parts of Bangladesh, including Sundarban, was formed much later. Ancient name of Assam was Pragyotishpura. Bagadartha was the king and ruins of his castle can still be seen in Novigonj today. Sylheti is an Indo-Aryan dialect spoken by an estimated 11 million individuals, essentially within the Sylhet division of Bangladesh, the Barak Valley and Hojai, local of Assam, and North Tripura and Unakoti area of Tripura in India. Other than, there are considerable number of Sylheti speakers within the Indian states of Meghalaya, Manipur, and Nagaland, as well as diaspora communities within the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Middle East. It is variously perceived as either a dialect of Bengali or a language in its own right. While most linguists consider it an independent language, for many native speakers, Sylheti forms the diagnostic vernacular, with standard Bengali forming the codified lect. Some incorrectly consider it as a corrupt form of Bengali, and there is a reported language shift from Sylheti to Bengali in Bangladesh, India, and the diaspora, though Sylheti has more vitality than Bangla in the UK. Sylheti is eponymously named after Sylhet, referring to the dialect or language spoken of the area. Sylhet is the Anglicanized spelling of the historical name Srihatta. According to Gearson in 1903, the vernacular was called Sylhetia by the Europeans after the town of Sylhet, though the speakers at that time referred to it as Jayantipuria, Purba Srihatia or Ujania, with the latter meaning the language of the upper country. Sylheti is also known as Sylheti, Sylheti Bangla, Sylheti, Syloti, and Syloti. The Muslim conquest of Sylhet in 1303 CE extended the migratory movements of Muslim Persianate Turks and Arabs, who settled among the native population and greatly influenced the local language. Thus Sylheti derived a large number of words from Persian Arabic, which cultivated a form of Islamic culture on the dialect or language. A script was developed in the region called Syloti Nagri, which primarily focused on disseminating Islamic poetry known as Puthi. There was an influence of the Assamese language on Sylheti when Sylhet was separated from Bengal and became part of the Assam province, British India in 1874. This, however, led to an opposition in Sylhet where demands to be reincorporated with the Bengal province were not taken heed of by the British. Sylhetis not only felt a historical or cultural affinity with Bengal, but also linguistically. Bengali literature had some influence from Sylheti. Popular songwriters or poets such as Hasan Raja or Shah Abdul Karim significantly contributed to the literature. Sylhet was reunited with Bengal following a referendum in 1947. Sylheti is a minoritized, politically unrecognized and understudied language. It is currently not officially recognized as a language in either Bangladesh or India. Some native speakers too consider it to be an informal version of Bengali and not an independent language, and there is a reported language shift to Bengali and a decrease in the number of native speakers since parents are not teaching it to their children. In Bangladesh, there is a diglossia where Sylheti is one among other low-status regional dialects, while Standard Bengali, the official language, has a higher status. Among the different dialect groups of the Eastern dialects, to which Sylheti belonged, Sylheti and Chittagonian have phonetic and morphological properties that are alien to Standard Bengali and other Western dialects of Bengali, and these differences are such that Sylheti is more distant to Standard Bengali than is Assamese. Recent scholarship notes that these morphophonological and mutual intelligibility differences are significant enough that Sylheti could claim itself as a language on its own right. As the majority of the diaspora in the United Kingdom speak Sylheti, it created an environment that was somewhat uninfluenced by Standard Bengali, inevitably leading some to view Sylheti as a distinct language. During the 1980s, there were unsuccessful attempts to recognize Sylheti as a language in its own right by a small group in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, which lacked support from the Sylheti community itself. Sylheti is the primary language of the northeast Bengal, also known as the Sylhet region, which today comprises the Sylhet division of Bangladesh and Karimganj district of Assam in India. Sylheti has not been given an official status by the government of Bangladesh, and there is much debate to whether it should be so recognized. Most Sylhetis are bilingual to at least some degree, as they are taught Bengali at all levels of education in Bangladesh. Although not widely known, Sylheti was formerly written in its own script, Syloti Nagri. Bangladesh does not recognize Sylheti as a separate language, therefore literature, warning signs and notices are all written in the Bengali language. In the 19th century, the British tea planters in the area referred to Sylheti as Sylhetia. In Assam, the language is still referred to as Srihatta, the name used in the ancient literature. Sylhet has a rich heritage of literature in the Syloti Nagri script, going back at least 200 years. During the 1971 Liberation War, when all Syloti Nagri printing presses were destroyed, the writing system came to a halt. After Bangladesh gained independence, the government of the newly formed Bangladesh mandated Bangla studies and the use of the Bengali alphabets as a curriculum to be taught at all levels of education. Efforts to establish Sylheti as a modern language were vigorously opposed by political and cultural forces allied to successive Bangladeshi governments. Now, there are two things that make Sylheti an important language in its own right, and not a colloquial or peasant corruption of Bengali, as some have alleged. Firstly, Sylheti is the language of choice, not just of the illiterate, but also of educated Sylhetis who can function well in Bengali when they choose to. Secondly, Sylheti is the only regional language related to Bengali which developed its own folk literature in its own script. Nobody quite knows when the Syloti Nagri script first arrived in Sylhet. Some say it came with companions of Shah Jalal who invaded Sylhet in 1303 AD. Others believe it came a couple of centuries later. The oldest Syloti Nagri manuscript known today is Talib Husun, in which the author Ghulam Husun says he is writing his putti in the year 1181. This translates to about 1774 AD or about 1560 AD, depending on which calendar is being used. As far as we know, Sylheti is unique among Indian languages in having its first printing font designed and its subsequent printing and publishing industry developed by nationals and not by foreigners. This is in marked contrast to Bengali and Assamese, whose printing and publishing were, at least initially, developed by Europeans. Sylhet has a rich heritage of literature in the Syloti Nagri script going back at least 200 years. Many Sylhetis even today are able to read from memory large sections of the most popular puthis. At one time, there was hardly a household in Sylhet that did not own printed versions of one or another of these puthis. Puthis were written as poetry. The purpose of the literature was to give moral and Islamic instruction to the people and never just to entertain. Some puthis were written by Sufi peers, as in spiritual leaders, to instruct the disciples. Others were written or printed for a much wider audience. Hazrat Shah Jalal, full name Shah Jalal ad-Din al-Mujarrad al-Turk al-Naqshbandi, is a celebrated Sufi Muslim figure in Bengal. Jalal's name is associated with the Muslim movement into northern eastern Bengal. Also, he is associated with the spread of Islam in Bangladesh through Sufism. Jalal was originally a Turkestani. He arrived at Sylhet in 1303, and this is according to a tablet inscription found in Ambarkhana in Sylhet. Dhaka renamed Zia International Airport to Hazrat Shah Jalal International Airport. Dhaka and Sylhet had named a university known as Hazrat Shah Jalal University of Science and Technology. The Mazarine is also located at Chittagong. On your screen here, you can see further examples of puthis. The photograph above is the front page of the puthi Shahadote Buzurgan, Traditions of the Elders, composed by Pir Muziruddin Ahmed since 1863 to 1933. Picture on the right, the photograph shows a page from the puthi Ghafir Noishet, Guidance of the Wayward, composed in 1843 by Pir Azmuth Ali. Here you can also see further evidence of more puthis. If people do acknowledge Sylheti as a proper language, rather than seeing it only as a dialect or colloquial corruption of Bengali, there is often still an underlying assumption that it is just an oral language, that it is not, nor cannot be, written down. Now this is simply not the case, as is amply evidenced by the strong tradition of Syloti Nagri literature. The accessibility of Sylheti Nagri is evidenced by the fact that women, usually among the least literate in developing societies, were able to read it. According to Rod Chalmers in his book Learning Sylheti, in a society often assumed to be sexist, the ability to read Sylheti Nagari was known to be particularly widespread among women. After the Islamic conquest of Sylhet in 1303, the city colloquially became nicknamed as Jalalabad. This colloquial name continued to be used in the Mughal period. Currently in the Sylhet City Corporation, there exists a metropolitan Thana known as the Jalalabad Thana, as well an area in its 7th ward. In 1874, the current Sylhet division, which included Karimgunj, was entirely known as the Sylhet district. In September of the same year, Sylhet was separated from mainland Bengal to be made a part of the non-regulation Chief Commissioner's province of Assam, Northeast Frontier Province, in order to facilitate Assam's commercial development. The people of Sylhet submitted a memorandum to the Viceroy protesting the inclusion in Assam. The protests subsided when the Viceroy, Lord Northbrook, visited Sylhet to reassure the people of education and justice would be administered from Bengal, and when the people in Sylhet saw the opportunity of employment in tea estates in Assam and a market for their produce. In 1905, Sylhet district rejoined Bengal as part of the new Surma Valley division of eastern Bengal and Assam. In 1912, the then Sylhet district was once again moved to the newly created Assam province alongside the other districts of the Surma Valley division. During the 1971 Liberation War, when all Syloti Nagri printing processes were destroyed, the writing system came to a halt. After Bangladesh gained independence, the government of the newly formed Bangladesh mandated Bangla studies and the use of the Bengali alphabets as a curriculum to be taught at all levels of education. Efforts to establish Sylheti as a modern language were vigorously opposed by political and cultural forces allied to successive Bangladeshi governments. The Sylheti script includes 5 independent vowels, 5 dependent vowels attached to a consonant letter, and 27 consonants. The Syloti Nagri alphabet differs from the Bengali alphabet as it is a form of Kaiti, a script or family of scripts which belongs to the main group of North Indian scripts of Bihar. The writing system's main use was to record religious poetry, described as a rich language and easy to learn. So there you have it, guys, a quick synopsis of Sylheti and its history and context. On your screen you can see credit and references from various sources that I've gathered from. Should you wish to sort of research more further, please do so with the references provided.